Some crimes are so heartbreaking or shocking that they change laws, change society, or even earn the label crime of the century. But the stories that made headlines in decades past aren't necessarily remembered today. I'm Amber Hunt, a journalist and author, and in each episode of this show, I'll examine a case that's maybe lesser known today, but was huge when it happened. This is Crimes of the Centuries. Rob Kissel's Cartier watch was still on the breakfast table when his wife told the couple's 2 household employees that he had already gone to work. The live-in housemaid and live-in nanny would have thought it odd because their boss was never without his watch. His wife, Nancy, ignored them. She was scurrying about trying to show motherly concern while dodging a question from the nanny about how she had injured her hand, which was freshly bandaged. "Burned it on the toaster," Nancy said. "Now let's get the children off to school." Then she said she might have a few errands for the workers to run. Nancy, who would usually shop all day for clothes and perfume and jewelry, was usually happy to let Min and Connie do the domestic and maternal things. But today, she took Min into the kitchen to tell her not to worry about cleaning the primary bedroom. Not today. Okay. Today, by the way, was November 2nd, 2003. And the Kissel household, it's important to note, was in Hong Kong. After Nancy told Min to steer clear of the bedroom, she made a phone call to a man in New Hampshire where there was a significant time difference. It was evening there. Then she sent an email to a hired clown she had a meeting with and wrote that, unfortunately, her husband was sick and she needed to reschedule. After that, Nancy had some instructions for Connie. She told her to buy bleach powder, rope, packing tape, and polyethylene sheets. Then Nancy herself ordered packing cartons from a moving company before going into town to buy bed sheets, a rug, and a bedspread. Then Nancy came home and stayed locked in her bedroom, stepping outside of it only to grab the supplies. Oh, Nancy did also make time to call the property manager of Parkview, Hong Kong's most envied address, to say she would need one of the storage compartments that were located in Tower 17's basement. The manager regretted that he had nothing to offer her. That was unacceptable, and Nancy said so. Then she hung up. Maybe I've written too much true crime, but methinks Nancy is going to have some explaining to do sooner or later. Spoiler alert, it will be sooner. But not before she had wrapped her dead husband in a soiled carpet and stuffed blood-soaked rags in a plastic garbage bag in her young son's closet. The case would dominate headlines from Hong Kong to New York. Wealthy American banker, beautiful wife, murder in paradise. But this isn't just another true crime story about greed and betrayal. Because within 3 years, there would be another body, another Kissel brother, another suspicious death. The Kissel name carried money, pedigree, and the kind of polished reputation that made people assume things were fine. But in the shadows of all that privilege, something poisonous was spreading, first in Hong Kong, then thousands of miles away in Connecticut. 2 brothers, 2 murders, 1 family fortune that seemed cursed. Crimes of the Centuries is sponsored by Home Chef. Winter break is so close I can practically smell it. You know what else I can smell?
What's that?
The mounds of takeout we've been eating lately. It's too much. So Scott and I made a pact to cook at home more while we're all braving winter inside.
A noble pact. A heroic pact. A pact we would have immediately broken if not for Home Chef.
Correct. They make cooking simple. Fresh food delivered, easy recipes to follow, and meals that actually taste great.
Home Chef really is rated #1 by users of other meal meal kits for quality, convenience, value, taste, and recipe ease. And it shows. Even their 5-ingredient meals are foolproof. Just 5 fresh, pre-portioned ingredients and dinner's done.
And the menu variety is a lifesaver. Over 30 meal options each week, all different diets and tastes covered. There's even a dedicated family menu, which makes weeknights actually enjoyable.
Plus, it's affordable. Home Chef customers save an average of $86 per month on groceries.
All right, here's the deal you don't want to miss. For a limited time, Home Chef is offering my listeners 50% off and free shipping for your first box plus free dessert for life. Go to homechef.com/COTC.
That's homechef.com/COTC for 50% off your first box and free dessert for life.
homechef.com/COTC. Must be an active subscriber to receive free dessert. Novelist Leo Tolstoy famously wrote that, quote, "All happy families are alike. Each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way," end quote. Every family has its cracks. Some just learn to live around them. Others keep digging until the whole foundation gives way. The Kissels of Upper Saddle River, New Jersey, were that kind. At the head of the family was Bill Kissel, a driven chemist turned entrepreneur, and his wife Elaine. Bill had struck out on his own to invent a dry toner cartridge that left copies unsmeared. You might laugh, but that was a pretty big deal in the early 1970s. Suffice to say, he beat Xerox to the punch and made a small fortune for his efforts. The neighborhood the family lived in was not for the aspiring, it was for the arrived. It was where, in later years, Richard Nixon would hand out Halloween candy to the neighbor kids, explained writer Joe McGinnis in his book, Never Enough. By then, though, the 3 Kissel children were gone, having grown up with privilege, yes, but also with enormous expectations, courtesy of their father, who required high-level success in exchange for love. Andrew, who was 4 years older than Rob, was vastly different than his brother. Their father, supposing he was to endorse his elder son for familiar favor, soon discovered that Andrew wasn't up to the job. Bill Kissel thought Andrew was a ne'er-do-well, a slacker, lazy, and worthless. Told repeatedly that he was a loser, Andrew knew that Rob, the younger son, had been crowned the golden child, the heir apparent. Jane, the youngest, got a lighter version of her father's expectations, what with her being a daughter and all. Plus, she had a rebellious streak and didn't really care all that much about her dad's demands. Now, Rob really was probably the smarter and more disciplined of the 2 boys. He was also a better athlete and more apt to make friends. Things came easy for him, at least easier than they ever were for Andrew. Rob wasn't Ivy League material, but he got a degree from the University of Rochester in engineering, briefly worked for his dad, then had enough of that and headed to New York to attend graduate school in business at NYU's Stern School. A quick study in finance, Rob was unrivaled in his ability to work punishingly long hours and do anything necessary to win whatever he figured was a contest. And everything was a contest to Rob. That's how he was raised. But he was principled and never cheated. His response was simply to outwork his rivals. In 2006, his father told New York Magazine, quote, "Robert is the man I would have liked to have been," end quote, which suggests someone dry and all business, but Rob could also be fun and spontaneous. For example, when he was 23 and about to embark on his graduate degree, Rob wanted a last hurrah, so he flew to Turks and Caicos for a holiday. His brother Andrew had, by then, already started and folded an unsuccessful retail car accessories shop. It had lasted just 18 months. Andrew wanted success, but he just wasn't the hard worker his brother was. He was a man who looked for shortcuts. Nancy Keeshan, meanwhile, grew up in Michigan and Northern California. Her grandmother was a Lazarus, as in the department store chain based in Cincinnati that would eventually grow and morph into Federated Department Stores, then into almighty Macy's. Nancy grew up privileged, but not gaudily so, and vaguely traumatized by her parents' divorce when she was just 12. She also grew up untamed and became, much to her narcissistic delight, uncommonly beautiful. She had a lot of fun, but she also had a raging temper. Smart enough to do well in life on her own, she just couldn't seem to hold down a job for long because she bored easily and wasn't great with authority. But really, who cared? The world was there for her enjoyment. Nothing else, nothing less. She had no fear. Chronically irresponsible, she survived off style and verve and, after she moved to New York to attend art school at Parsons, a fancy rich friend or two. Which meant that, quite coincidentally, on a lark in 1987, the entitled, hopelessly chic and freshly blonde restaurant manager and a society girlfriend found themselves on a nude beach in Turks and Caicos, where the oft-repeated meet-cute has it that Rob Kissel introduced himself to Nancy by saying, "You'd look great with your clothes on." That might be apocryphal, I don't know. But whatever he said, it worked. And for the record, buff and well-bred, Rob looked good in clothes too.
He was the best-looking boy in the school. He was pretty easy to notice.
That's his high school sweetheart, Carol Horton, talking. Anyway, things moved pretty fast between Rob and Nancy. They dated, moved in together, and married in 1989. A young couple wrapped up in their own chemistry and the glittering, high-energy world of New York's rising elite. Rob had already begun to ascend to the top ranks in his new chosen field, investment banking. You know, where the real money is. His expertise was in something called distressed debt. He seemed born to turn people's ineptitude and mismanagement into barrels of cash for others and himself. Roz Lichter, a New York neighbor, told NBC's Dennis Murphy that Rob wasn't flamboyant. He was just interested in making a career for himself. Nancy, on the other hand, was really into money. Like, really into it, he said. Rob's wealth soon dwarfed his father's. Elizabeth Lacaze told Dateline,
Rob was starting to make a lot of money then, and, she liked it. She liked that lifestyle.
When Elaine, Rob, and Andrew's mother died in 1990, so too did any ameliorating influence on Bill's tyrannical treatment of his sons. As one of the brightest stars in the financial analyst world, Rob soon joined Goldman Sachs, where he hoped to one day become a partner. To that end, he was sent to Hong Kong in 1997 because a man had to succeed on an international platform to really win at this game. And Hong Kong was the place to be at that time. A whole portion of Southeast Asia's currencies were flailing, and a small banker could swoop in on cash-strapped businesses and sell off their assets, making an absolute killing. By now, Rob and Nancy had 2 little girls, and Nancy had one pastime. She spent her days acquiring. Rob had his beloved work, which he sometimes indulged in 110 hours a week at his Hong Kong office, often traveling between the Asian capitals of the world. They lived in a posh 3,500 square foot apartment in a verdant residential complex that boasted 18 towers full of apartments, full of people just like them. Aspiring, affluent, and apparently Asia-adverse? That is, there was nothing here that looked like a bustling, overcrowded marketplace of desperate strivers. And why would it? Their apartment cost $20,000 a month to lease. In today's money, it'd be twice that. The 18-tower Parkview complex was a self-contained world with entertainment spots, restaurants, a driving range, pools, tennis courts, a preschool, gardens, a spa, a waterfall, salons, boutiques, and an upscale grocery. It was sanitary, convenient, and isolated from whatever the rest of smoggy Hong Kong had to offer. Someone called it America under glass. You didn't have to leave if you didn't want to. The Kissels also had Conchita Macaraig, they called her Connie, and Maximina Macaraig, known as Min, who worked as nanny and housekeeper, respectively. They were, like most Hong Kong expat domestic help, from the Philippines. They lived behind the apartment's kitchen in a reworked pantry, worked all but one day a week, and didn't complain about anything. They made enough money to send some home. And Rob made enough money to lend his brother $500,000 to start his own real estate empire in New York and New Jersey. Andrew had cleverly named this business Handrock, merging his and his wife's initials with Nancy and Rob's. The rock part at the end was supposed to convey stability. It sounded nice. Opinions differ on whether it ever was. Parkview neighbor Trudy Samra befriended Nancy while they were both expats. She said,
Nancy seemed very happy. She always tried to please Rob. She was always very proud of what he achieved. On the outside world, it appeared she had the perfect life.
Of course, things are never truly perfect, and Parkview, while about as posh could be, presented its own set of challenges for people who live there.
In the beginning, it's all very overwhelming, and it's fantastic, and it's a great city, and you have a beautiful apartment. And then the husband ends up being away much more than he promised, and you spend many nights alone.
Some saw Nancy, while perfect as adornment, as disengaged. Her children were too young to be interesting, and Rob was an overworked, overzealous overachiever. That part about Rob made Patriarch Bill enormously proud. His stridency, though, set the stage for family events to be caustic affairs that no one could or chose to avoid. Andrew was doing okay. He had that real estate venture, which seemed to be doing well, ostensibly returning a nice dividend to those in his family who had invested early. From the outside looking in, the Kissels looked every bit the end product of American capitalism done right. Appearances can deceive. It was McGinnis who suggested that Nancy had nothing of substance in her personal character to help her deal with her daily life as it was in Hong Kong. She and Rob fought over who was in control of their lives. Nothing and no one seemed to be in Nancy's control. Even her mother had said Nancy couldn't control her own children, who at the time of the Hong Kong move were just 4 years old and barely 1. Nancy had abdicated all responsibility for them to Connie, whose job it was largely to keep the kids quiet and out of Nancy's way. Neither Nancy nor Connie were much in the kitchen, which meant the children were raised on snacks and fast food, something that appalled Rob. Nancy, of course, thought Rob had no place to talk, calling him a 5-minute father, as he hardly had time for the kids. Look, relationships are complicated and messy, and I don't pretend to have clear insight into my own, much less this one. But it seems to me from the outside that it boiled down to this. Nancy was bored and blamed Rob. Rob thought Nancy was lazy, a bad mother, and a squanderer of the money he worked such long hours to make. So naturally, the couple had a third child. This happened in late 1999. Nancy was 35 and certain this was the last straw for her once enviable body. With the baby came a new job for Rob. He happened to get a better offer, so he left Goldman Sachs for Merrill Lynch. The family moved into even more palatial digs at the Parkview because he made more money, and this move was a way to show it. Later, Nancy would say that she suffered from postpartum depression during this period. Per McGinnis, quote, "But they made it a point to show no trace of discord in public. Expat life was all about facade. At the United Jewish Congregation, at the Aberdeen Marina Club, at Goldman Sachs functions, and at Parkview, Rob and Nancy had appearances to maintain. He was the brilliant banker, devoted husband and father. She was the loyal wife and energetic mother with the sparkling smile and the look of mischief in her eye." End quote. Nancy needed a project. She tapped one of her favorite hobbies for inspiration.
Skiing was basically everything for them.
It was one of the things she and Rob actually had in common. Nancy decided to throw herself into renovating a property she and Rob owned in Vermont ski country on Stratton Mountain, where the Kissels had had a second home for decades. The area claims to be the birthplace of snowboarding, though a little research throws that into serious doubt. Regardless, it is the biggest single ski mountain in the eastern United States, and its natural beauty, tree cover, and carved trails make the region highly desirable and largely unaffordable for almost anyone who might want to live there. The exclusivity and the opportunity for Nancy to do everything to her taste and her specifications appealed to her. Rob said that'd be fine, but all costs had to be run by him first. And they fought about that. They could afford this, she said. He said he found almost every expenditure overly extravagant. She then decided to take the children back to the United States during the summer, ostensibly to Vermont, to oversee the work being done on the Stratton house. She didn't tell Rob she would stop in New York for a few weeks first, and while this is in the era of cell phones, it came before we all constantly shared our locations. Connie would handle the children, while Nancy shopped in an exhaustive, frenzied manner all day, every day, stopping only to nap at the ritzy hotels she had booked near Central Park and Madison Avenue. When she finally got to Vermont, Rob joined her, as did the rest of his family. Andrew was clearly overindulging. It seemed he was doing too much cocaine and drinking too much. Their father blew up, said that Andrew was an embarrassment. He told Haley, Andrew's wife, who was a Wall Street stock analyst and often an MSNBC expert on financial affairs, that she could have done far better than his worthless son. They all sniped at one another, making sure to wound each other deeply with words they could never take back throughout the stay. This was family for them. Rob and his family returned to Hong Kong, and the cycle of their lives repeated as before. That is, until March 2002, when SARS, a coronavirus that caused severe acute respiratory infections, broke out in China. Rob sent his family back to the U.S. to be safe. While the renovations in Vermont were nearing completion in early 2003, Rob said he wanted an extensive home theater system installed. He made the necessary arrangements. The company he tapped sent out Michael Del Priore to do the specs. Michael met with both Nancy and Rob. Nancy found the working man immensely attractive. He reciprocated. Nancy began to spend a lot more time in Vermont. By June 2003, Rob, now back in Hong Kong, had an inkling. He called a Manchester, Vermont private investigator to see what exactly was going on. He installed spyware on his wife's computer so that he could see everything she was doing online. He could see that the emails between Del Priore and his wife were not about home theater. Surveillance on Nancy began in earnest. Rob was told the meetings she was having with Del Priore continued. Not only that, but Del Priore was now bringing his daughter over to play with Nancy's children. She spent time with him in motels, even at his mobile home, which was so not Nancy. His white van showed up at the mountain house in the evening. It would still be there in the morning. Nancy made a point to tell Del Priore, and later her psychiatrist, that Rob was abusive verbally and physically, that he was forcing her to have painful sex. Del Priore sympathized, and Nancy reveled in her newfound passion and her revived sense of self. She would show Rob who was in the driver's seat. Crimes of the Centuries is sponsored by Hims. So Scott and I were talking the other day about how many things in adulthood unexpectedly become stressful.
Right. And confidence can take a hit way faster than people admit, which is why it's nice there are ways to simplify things when you need support.
Exactly. That's where Hims comes in. They make it easy for men to get access to personalized prescription treatment options, including hard mints and Sex RX plus Climax Control if prescribed, without the stress or the awkwardness.
What I like about it is that Hims offers options ranging from trusted generics, which can cost up to 95% less than brand names, to those hard mints if prescribed.
Hims brings expert care straight to you with 100% online access to personalized treatment plans that put your goals first.
It's not that one-size-fits-all approach either. Real medical providers make sure you get what you need to get results.
To get simple online access to personalized affordable care for ED, hair loss, weight loss, and more, visit hims.com/COTC. That's hims.com/COTC for your free online visit. hims.com/COTC. Actual price will depend on product and subscription plan. Featured products include compounded drugs, which the FDA does not approve or verify for safety, effectiveness, or quality. Prescription required. See website for details, restrictions, and important safety information. In the months that followed, Rob was paying $12,500 a week plus expenses to have his wife followed and her conversations monitored by a private investigator named Frank Shea. Once, Shea called Rob while Nancy was leaving the Vermont house with Del Priori. After they hung up, Rob called Nancy and asked her not to do anything stupid. Quote, "We have children," end quote. This is Shea speaking to Dateline.
Rob Kissel was devastated. All he wanted to do was get his marriage back together. He loved Nancy Kissel, and he loved his children.
Nancy went back to Hong Kong, though not for long. Rob had to have back surgery in New York, and she came with him for support. He was immobilized and reveling in his wife's attention, thinking her affair was done. But it would later be discovered that Nancy had been sneaking out to repeatedly call and rendezvous with her lover. Rob also found out that Nancy was paying the guy's bills and had done web searches for medications causing heart attack and drug overdose. What he did not know was that Nancy had convinced a doctor that her own inability to sleep was so severe that she needed to be prescribed Rohypnol, a drug that incapacitates a person. You probably know it as the date rape drug. Rob wanted to make the marriage work. He asked her to return with him to Hong Kong. Their old patterns resumed. To his credit, Shea found this alarming enough that he actually flew to Hong Kong to issue a dire warning. Here he is explaining to Dateline.
I told him, I said, I think your wife is trying to kill you.
And what was his reaction? Did he believe it?
I think Rob Kissel was in denial. I don't think he believed that his wife would try to kill him.
Shea asked Rob to send hair samples to him to have them tested for the presence of drugs that Nancy might be putting in his food and drink. Rob said he would, but the samples remained in an envelope in his office, never sent. It was late fall 2003 by now. He was contemplating divorce, but he wanted the kids to have a sweet Halloween. He planned to broach the breakup discussion with Nancy the following Sunday, November 2nd. That morning, the couple went to an event at the synagogue while the kids were in Sunday school. Nancy befriended Andrew Tanzer and his young daughter there, inviting the little girl to come play with her children that afternoon. They all lived at Parkview, and Tanzer, the Hong Kong bureau chief for Forbes magazine, welcomed getting to know others there. That afternoon, Tanzer delivered his daughter to the Kissels, made the usual small talk, and was preparing to go when the little girls implored him to stay because they were making strawberry milkshakes and he just had to have one. He and Rob complied, while their daughters delighted in the concoction they had helped prepare. Rob was glad the kids were going to be occupied. He had a big conference call that evening, which he had to prepare for. That part he said out loud. What he didn't say was that after the conference call, he was planning to have the divorce talk with Nancy. Tanzer went home after the milkshake and, feeling suddenly drowsy, fell into a prolonged sleep. He would later say of the milkshake,
"It was a very thick, sweet milkshake. It was pink, and it had ground up cookies in it. I thought it had this odd taste, and she said it's a special recipe."
Meanwhile, an associate named David No called Rob mid-afternoon to shore up some details before the conference call they had scheduled later on. Here's FBI profiler Candice DeLong in her show Killer Psyche.
According to the co-worker, Robert sounded incoherent and sleepy on the phone. His speech was slurred, and he struggled to form sentences. The co-worker thought that Robert might have had a few drinks. He knew Robert was planning to discuss divorce with Nancy later that night, so it seemed plausible that he drank out of stress. But one thing the co-worker couldn't explain was why Robert would choose to do so before an important meeting.
The next day, Nancy called her father to say that Rob had thrashed her within an inch of her life. He needed to come to Hong Kong. She put her children to bed and told her employees to go to their rooms and stay there. Then she sent Min out for peppermint oil. Lots of it. On Tuesday, she saw a doctor to have her ribs x-rayed, and she claimed Rob had beat her up before he left the apartment in a huff that Sunday night. Nancy seemed disappointed that the x-rays showed no appreciable injury. Then she went shopping again, this time to buy 2 large rugs. Normally, she would have had such a purchase delivered, but this time she had a clerk shove them into her Mercedes so she could take them with her immediately. Nancy called a friend in the States and said Rob had beat her, then left shoeless. She hadn't seen him since. The friend began calling around Hong Kong to try and find him. He didn't show up for work. The apartment now reeked, and Connie and Min could barely breathe. The boxes Nancy had packed up and taken to the storage room in a separate tower had smelled to high heaven as well. She now asked Min to go to the storage room and rearrange things because the carpet she had stowed behind the couch had to be taken there. That, the maid noticed, was the source of the smell. "Why so big?" Min had asked. Nancy said she had stuffed it with sheets and pillows, but she had also taped it shut at both ends and wrapped it tightly with nylon rope and Velcro straps and anything else that might keep it from, well, leaking. Black plastic bags had been fitted over each end. Min finally told Connie, after Nancy had gone back into the bedroom, "I think Mrs. Kissel has done wrong." The friend Nancy had called was growing increasingly worried, so she phoned Connie. Connie told her about the carpet and the smell and the fact that she hadn't been in the Kissel's bedroom since Saturday. The friend called David Noe at Merrill Lynch, who called the police about a missing person. He also told them about the rug. By Friday, the Hong Kong police had served search warrants at Parkview. They found Rob inside the large carpet bundle, partially swaddled by one of his daughter's sleeping bags. Inside the packing boxes were blood-soaked sheets, towels, and a lead statuette of two small girls that had belonged to Nancy's mother, a gift from a different life. They had also found evidence of bloodstains on walls, in the bed, and on furniture in the bedroom. None of the splatter appeared above a limited height, which suggested Rob had been low to the ground, possibly immobilized, when he was attacked. He showed no sign of defensive wounds. A few days later, they found prescription bottles inside Nancy's purse. Those matched exactly the drugs found in Rob's system at his death. A tiny aside, I'll note that it seems odd how slowly the Hong Kong police conducted this search. Further, when a family member went to the apartment to retrieve some things for the children, they found no guard at the unlocked door. The investigation had some issues, but it was moving forward. Pathologists now confirmed to the family and the press that Rob had been rendered unconscious and that he had been both prone and unmoving when forcibly hit 5 times with a blunt object. Part of his skull had been crushed so severely that bones had sliced into his brain and were visible. Nancy was arrested, after which she became almost catatonic. She was taken to a psychiatric facility. Rob and Nancy's stunned families gathered to talk about what to do with the 3 children. Tense and grieving, they readied to duel to the death over the right to protect those kids from the influence of the other family. Everyone there knew that the days ahead would show their mother to be the one who orphaned them, and that a lot of money was at stake. Everyone was aware that Rob had set up a $20 million trust for the children in the unlikely event of he and Nancy's deaths. And they also knew that, should Nancy be convicted, the considerable communal estate was likely to be in play as well. Bill suggested that Andrew and Haley made the most sense to become the children's guardians. The couple had 2 small girls of their own, and they lived in the historically relevant, affluent coastal community of Greenwich, Connecticut, home to a crowd of financial services companies, great schools, and, importantly, polo grounds. Even Ira Keeshan, Nancy's father, had to agree it made sense. And yet, there was a glitch in the plan. No one had consulted Haley, who was back in the States. She knew the life she had with Andrew was no safe haven for anyone, least of all for these 3 damaged children. She was hanging on the best she could as it was. Now, I should tell you that Haley and Nancy had not always bought into the competition that played out between brothers. Haley was the daughter of the head of a $500 million engineering firm in New Jersey. She went to Penn and then to Columbia Business School. She skied so well that in 1983, she was the world mogul champion. She had also done very well on her own in the business world. She was smart enough to know her husband was in big trouble. She knew that she and Andrew had to vacate their Upper East Side co-op when Andrew, the treasurer of the board of the apartment building from 1996 to 2002, had been found to be stealing from his neighbors. He had created false companies, paid them high fees for their work, and transferred the money, a lot of money, to himself. Haley knew he had embezzled $4 million from the high-rises reserve fund, and because of a civil settlement arranged only a month before Rob's death, Andrew was required to pay that amount back with interest. Haley also knew, per the New York Times, that the Manhattan District Attorney was launching a criminal investigation into Andrew's behavior. She knew their financial well-being wasn't remotely well anymore. Which is not to say she knew everything, but she knew enough to say that the kids would be best off with Ira, Nancy's dad. So, when the families left Hong Kong, the kids, ages 9, 7, and 3, were to go to Winnetka, Illinois to live with two older people who had completed their hands-on parenting years decades earlier. Bill would live to fight another day. He didn't have to wait long. Crimes of the Centuries is sponsored by ButcherBox. With winter break coming and us trying really hard to cook at home more, one thing I've noticed is that having good protein already in the freezer makes everything so much easier. And that's why we've been really loving ButcherBox.
Yeah, especially this time of year. The grocery store is pure chaos, and I cannot fight another crowd in the meat aisle.
ButcherBox delivers over 100 premium protein choices straight to your door. Things like 100% grass-fed beef, free-range organic chicken, pork-raised crate-free, and wild-caught seafood. And they've been doing this for nearly a decade with meat and seafood that's antibiotic-free, hormone-free, and independently verified. It's just a cleaner, more trustworthy version of what you'd find in the store.
I like that we can customize our box, mix in staples we use all the time, and try a few new cuts for winter cooking. I'm still thinking about those sirloins we grilled last month.
Right, and with holiday hosting and school break looming, it's nice to know we're stocked without having to run out last minute.
You get member-only perks like recipe inspiration, tips, and exclusive deals. Okay, Amber, hit them with the offer.
As an exclusive offer, our listeners can get free steak in every box for a year, plus $20 off your first box when you go to butcherbox.com/COTC.
That's right. Your choice of filet mignon, New York strip, or ribeye in every box for an entire year, plus $20 off your first box and free shipping always.
That's butcherbox.com/COTC. Don't forget to use our link so they know we sent you. Nancy's father and stepmother bowed out of the parenting job after just 2 weeks, ceding it to Nancy's 24-year-old brother Ryan, who quit medical school in Cincinnati to take charge of the children. Bill Kissel wasted no time making his position clear. If Ryan didn't back off, Bill would ruin him. He threatened to go to the papers, accuse Ryan of child molestation, whatever it took to keep the children out of his hands. Bill wanted them with Andrew and Haley, period. In early 2004, a superior court in Stamford, Connecticut, agreed, giving Andrew and Haley temporary co-custody pending what happened in the criminal case against Nancy, who was pining in a Hong Kong jail for Mike Del Priore. By the time she finally contacted her children, it would take her the better part of a year to reach out, the kids had been moved from Winnetka to Cincinnati to Greenwich. And those poor kids. In that time, Andrew had gained a mistress and had welcomed himself to the Children's Trust Fund and to an array of illegal shifting of the Hanrock Real Estate Company money. Haley knew about the mistress. She suspected the rest. She reportedly told a friend that his business was likely, quote, a Ponzi scheme, end quote. But not all was bleak. Nancy got bail. She was the first person ever in Hong Kong to be granted that opportunity while in jail on murder charges. The transcript of the hearing in which she was granted it was sealed, something quite legal under Hong Kong law, making the matter a completely private one. There was no way, short of a leak, that the press could find out that she was out or how she had managed it. A year to the day after she killed Rob, she posted a $1 million bond thanks to an anonymous donor from within the higher echelons of Merrill Lynch. She chose not to have her children come to Hong Kong to see her. A month into the new year, Haley filed for divorce from Andrew. By then, Andrew had been on a buying spree that involved collecting vintage automobiles, investing in a vulgar Broadway show called Pieces of Ass, and entertained lavishly on his 75-foot yacht based in Miami. He had perfected the art of real estate fraud, forging documents to obtain loans on properties he had already mortgaged or were no longer his. His cocaine addiction complicated and fueled his now quickened pace to obtain cash and spend it. Haley confided in Andrew's sister, Jane, and Jane, the one sibling in the Kissel brood who had gotten the hell away from her father and his toxicity, decided it was time to save the only Kissels she could. She told Andrew she was taking the kids. Haley now said that wasn't a good solution, because when Andrew divorced her, she would have nothing, and that money those kids brought with them to Connecticut would come in handy. For a smart woman, she was, like all Kissels, save Jane, remarkably dumb. Jane and Haley now battled bitterly for the custody of Elaine, June, and Rice as their mutual sister-in-law got ready for her highly anticipated Hong Kong trial. Here's local Hong Kong journalist Francis Moriarty speaking to Al Jazeera English television.
There was the question of was she or was she not an abused spouse? All of these issues, and they were wealthy, extremely wealthy by Hong Kong standards. So it was a peek into the world of the wealthy expatriate pulling back the veil.
A lot of people wanted that peek. In Hong Kong especially, but also in New York and on Wall Street, to look into the high-stress, high-reward family life of international investment bankers. In the summer of 2005, Andrew was charged with embezzlement in relation to the co-op theft and with orchestrating a massive $25 million mortgage fraud scheme that would, A, put him in prison for a very long time, or B, leave him without so much as two sticks to rub together. Nancy Walkley, an attorney who had been involved in a couple of real estate transactions, said she noticed that there were back-to-back transactions that looked suspicious. She blew the whistle.
The fact caused us to scrutinize some of the documents that were being involved with these various properties he was developing, and ultimately led us to conclude that something was not right. It was forgery and fraudulent releases of mortgages so that he was effectively, on the land records, freeing up his titles so that he could borrow more and more money against them, when in reality those were fake releases.
In short, these properties had mortgages on them already. Andrew would submit fraudulent paperwork saying those loans had been paid back when really they hadn't been. Then he would go back to the bank and borrow more money. We're talking $3 or $4 million on the same property. The FBI said he was defrauding a number of investors, including members of his own family. Meanwhile, back in Hong Kong, Nancy was dragging Rob through the mud. She said he would beat her and rape her in coke-filled rages. She said she had told Rob that Sunday afternoon that she wanted a divorce, and he had lost his mind, saying he was going to kill her. She said he got a baseball bat and began swinging it. She said she acted in self-defense then, began to dissociate while trying to cope with what she had done. It was all a blank, she said. She also dismissed having any relationship with the guy who installed her home theater in Vermont. Min and Connie testified they never saw or heard any signs of abuse. They told the jury everything they could remember about what happened the week after Rob, quote-unquote, disappeared. On September 1st, 2005, Nancy Kissel was found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in a Hong Kong prison. It made national news. From the Associated Press.
A murder conviction in Hong Kong of an American who drugged her investment banker husband with a milkshake. The verdict unanimous, the life sentence automatic for Nancy Kissel.
Nancy's stepfather, Michael McLaughlin, said he was
shocked at the outcome, can't conceive of the mindset of the jurors that could listen to that evidence for 10 weeks and come away with that belief. Just can't even comprehend that. But all in all, I think it was a fair trial.
Afterward, Nancy wrote a letter to the Connecticut judge now set to rule on her children's guardianship. You would think she might have been on her brother's side, but no. Nancy was Team Haley. The New York Times reported on September 24th that Jane Kissel described the children's current living status as, quote, bleak and chaotic, end quote. She said that Haley was using the children as pawns to solve her own deepening financial woes. I mean, that could hardly be disputed. Court records show that Andrew and Haley were receiving an $8,000 a month allotment from the estate for the three children's food, clothing, travel, sports expenses, and babysitting. Their tuitions to private school and any medical expenses were a separate expense billed directly to the estate. On October 19th, 2005, a judge noted that Robert's will had named his sister Jane as his children's guardian, and he noted that their mother had, given up her right to have a say in their rearing now that she was convicted of murdering their father. As such, the judge awarded custody to Jane and her husband. The trio of tattered tykes now headed off to Mercer Island, Washington, away from all that family treachery. Crimes of the Centuries is sponsored by Drip Drop. I have this long-standing flaw as a human being. I don't actually like the taste of plain water. If hydration were a personality test, I would fail.
It's true. I find water refreshing, like a normal person, but you won't drink it unless there's a little something in it for flavor.
This is why Drip Drop has basically become a daily survival tool for me. And because Drip Drop actually tastes good, I keep up with it.
And this stuff is legit. Drip Drop is doctor-developed, proven fast hydration that helps your body and mind work better. It uses a precise ratio of electrolytes and glucose for rapid absorption, delivering 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of leading sports drinks.
Yeah, and it's trusted by firefighters, medical pros, and over 90% of top college and pro teams because it really does rehydrate faster than water alone. Plus, flavor matters to me more than the average person, and they have 16 original flavors and 8 sugar options. I rotate between berry and lemon, depending on my mood.
And it fits into literally any routine. Morning, post-workout, midday slump. You can even set up flexible subscription options so you're never stuck without it.
Here's the offer. Right now, Drip Drop is offering podcast listeners 20% off your first order. Go to dripdrop.com and use promo code COTC.
That's dripdrop.com, promo code COTC for 20% off. Stock up now at dripdrop.com and use promo code COTC.
On October 7th, 2005, Andrew Kissel pleaded not guilty to embezzling that $4 million from his co-op. He was in court the day before, looking dazed, according to a reporter, while wearing an electronic ankle bracelet under his gray suit. The ankle bracelet? Well, that was put there because he was under house arrest by the feds. His own attorney, Phil Russell, spoke to the press that day.
He was the worst thing that ever happened to his investors and to people that trusted him with money. He stole money. That was something that he didn't seem able to control. He wanted a bigger car. He wanted a bigger boat. He wanted to be out in front.
At the end of March 2006, Andrew agreed to plead guilty in exchange for a limited sentence of between 8 and 10 years. While he awaited the formal sentencing, the rent for the $15,000 a month estate he and Haley had rented in Greenwich was going unpaid. She was leaving for good with the kids. The divorce was underway. On April 1st, 2006, the move out of the house was almost complete. Andrew was due in court that Monday, April 3rd, to officially enter his plea and put on his prison jumpsuit. He asked that a bed and a chair be left behind so he could sleep in the house over the weekend. He and Haley fought over that in front of the movers, but she eventually gave in. She did call Bill to say she worried that Andrew might do something to himself over the weekend. Bill didn't bother to check in. Former Greenwich Police Chief Jim Walters later explained,
"We were notified by the movers who arrived at the residence and found Mr. Kissel in the basement."
Haley's fears of suicide had been unfounded. It was clear straight away that her husband's death had been a homicide. Greenwich Police Detective Pasquale Urefino.
It was bound and gagged. There was a lot of blood all over the concrete floor. I believe the final blow may have been to the jugular. He bled out. He bled out a lot.
Police soon announced,
We do believe that Mr. Kissel was the intentional target of this assault.
We do not believe at all that this was a random act.
the lineup of people who might be responsible reached around the block. Andrew had been bound, gagged, and brutally stabbed in the basement of his Greenwich rental. To police, it looked like a hit. There was no forced entry. Investigators had questions. For starters, who knew he'd be there? And who knew he'd be there alone? When they contacted Haley, his estranged wife, detectives took notes. She didn't seem to be distraught. She didn't want to see the body or know about the specifics. The FBI offered to help track down everyone on their list who might have wanted Andrew dead. Now, mortgage and insurance companies had lost the most in Andrew's real estate scam, but the cops figured they would just write it off. Haley still threw out the idea that it was suicide, but the manner of death didn't fit, unless maybe he had ordered his own hit. But he was set to get a relatively light sentence. He had no money to leave his children. The theory had serious flaws. The investigation continued for about 5 years when the Greenwich cops finally unraveled it. Carlos Trujillo had been Andrew's chauffeur and all-purpose handyman. He had apparently been worried that his part in Andrew's shenanigans, his theft, his frauds, his money laundering, would come to light when Andrew entered his plea. It seemed smart to preemptively shut him up. Carlos's cousin, Lenny, had agreed to help. They'd planned it for 6, maybe 8 months, said Lenny, when he finally talked. He insisted he did not take part in the actual murder. Police didn't believe him. The cousins had taken pains to cover their crime. Carlos had thought to use his tollway pass to show he had gone into New York that night. He paid cash to go back the other way, his cousin with him. Andrew had let the cousins inside without a second thought. The three drank and snorted coke before the moment arrived for the cousins to take Andrew to the basement, tie him up, put a bag over his head, and stab him to death. The first jury to hear the case acquitted Carlos of murder, but were split on the attempted murder charge. On that, they stayed deadlocked. In March 2011, Carlos Trujillo avoided a second trial by entering an Alford plea, maintaining his innocence but agreeing that the prosecution had enough to convict him. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison with credit for about 3 years already served. After serving 3 additional years, the remainder of his sentence was suspended and he was deported back to Colombia. Lenny Trujillo pleaded guilty to manslaughter and conspiracy to commit murder. Charges of capital murder were dropped because he had agreed to testify for the prosecution against his cousin. He stuck to his story that he backed out of the actual killing. He was sentenced in April 2011 to 6 years in prison, after which he too was deported. On February 11, 2010, Hong Kong's Court of Final Appeal overturned Nancy's conviction and ordered a new trial because her counsel had successfully argued that the prosecution had used inadmissible evidence at the first trial. She tried to get the charge reduced to manslaughter on the second go-round, but was found guilty of murder again on March 25, 2011. Her final appeal was exhausted in April 2014. Later that year, she spoke to Deborah Mayo of Bloomberg. She said she had no regrets about her life. Quote, "I can't spend my time explaining the unexplainable. I'd rather try to seek a peaceful heart," end quote. When asked what she might do differently, she said, quote, "I don't know how to undo something I never understood," end quote. She is now 61. She is still incarcerated in a country she once said she would never love, and now will never leave. To research this case, journalist Amy Wilson read Joe McGinnis's book, Never Enough. She read various newspapers and magazine work that took on the plight of one or both brothers. She read the investigative discovery piece by Catherine Townsend. She read or watched the newspaper and TV coverage of the trials that followed their murders in the Wall Street Journal, The Guardian, the New York Times, the Bergen County Record, NBC, CBS, and the BBC. Crimes of the Centuries is available early and ad-free through Grab Bag Collab. Head to www.grabbagcollab.com for exclusive content related to this show and access to other series on our profit-sharing network. Unless noted in the citations, this case was researched and written by me, Amber Hunt, and produced by Henry Lavoie. Original music is by Bruce Hunt, Andrew Higley, and sometimes my child, Hunt Van Benscoten. Other music comes from Epidemic Sound. If you like the show, please help us out by rating and reviewing on Apple Podcasts. Also tell your friends. For more information or to recommend a case, go to centuriespod.com. On Instagram, we're @centuriespod. And you can find us on the Crimes of the Centuries Facebook page.